So after doing the Q&A for the press to handstand, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about the pathway of the press. So today I'm going to cover lots of different drills that you can use to challenge, strengthen and condition the pathway of the press. So this is only obviously a section of your press handstand training. You should be training the partial range, the bottom of the position, and I've covered that in other videos. But today I'm just going to cover the pathway. I'm going to show lots of different options for different levels. And definitely let me know down in the comments if you know of or use any other variations that I haven't covered today. I'm going to show all the variations in a straddle press, but obviously you can do the same thing in a tuck, a frog, or a pike position, depending on your mobility or your goals. So the main thing we're going to cover today is that pathway. So where we lift off from, so from here, we go through, pass through the straddle to our handstand, the eccentric, go into straddle, parts of the back will articulate depending on which variation you use, finishing on the tiptoes. So how do we train that pathway? Today I'm going to go through those variations. Let's start off with the floor version. So I'm going to mimic the handstand position. So low back into the floor. Now if you don't have this, if you can't have low back on the floor here, you could bend the knees slightly and keep heels on the floor. Now ideally with the position, legs would be straight. I'm going to come around the outside, have the feet as low as I can towards the floor, pass through the straddle, come up to the start of the press. So imagine you was on your hands and your feet, and you'll go back to press to handstand. I go through that path. So ideally what's going to happen here is when I open the legs, I'm going to push my low back hard into the floor, my butt comes off. So my butt's off, my low back's on, now my mid back's on my upper back, now only my upper back, and then I finish in that position and then reverse it back down again. So upper back and mid back, low back, mid back, finish back into the handstand position. Now if you find you can't get your legs up in that position, you can have your hands down below. So I can put my hands down here and push off. If you find that your legs go straight up in the air and you can't lift up, it's probably due to mobility. So you could anchor yourself, you could hold on to something. So if I hold on to something, it's going to make it easier to pull my legs up. And I come back down again. I could put a mat underneath my butt, so it raises my hips up and lets me turn over a little bit more. So there's some options to do that floor version. Now it is normal to get a bit of a clunk in the hip when you do that one. If you do, just raise the leg up a little bit or go around, bypass that. You don't tend to get that when you're on your hands because the hips can move out the way. It's just where the femur and the hip are clunking over something. Okay, then we have the wall versions. Now there's three main variations that I teach up against the wall. You can have back to wall, and there's two variations there. One is to put everything against the wall. So I've turned the hands out, I've put everything against the wall. So my head, my back, my legs, my butt, and then I'm going to come down, pass through my straddle, push my butt and my low back against the wall, and then peel off slowly until my toes touch. If I have it, I probably need to move the hands a little bit further away. I could do that in the concentric. So coming up, same thing, everything against the wall, push back off at the top. So that's probably the easier option for most people because it's a bit easier to lay everything against the wall. The harder version, but the one that's going to get you closer to the real thing, is to only put your butt against the wall, then the low back, then the mid back, then the upper back, then the shoulders. So same deal, handstand out slightly. I'm in freestyle and handstand ideally. I would open to straddle. Now this is where the butt touches. Now I turn over, low back touches, mid back touches, upper back touches, touch the floor. Concentric if you have it, same thing, butt touches, come back off the wall, there. So there's less contact with the wall, and I'm basically just touching the wall when I need to push that body part in that direction. So it would be butt, low back, mid back, upper back. Another variation is the chest to wall handstand version. Now this one just be a little bit careful with in terms of mobility. So if you don't have great straddle mobility, start with your hands very far away. If not, the wall's going to kick you off. So I start in this position, slide down. That's why I've got the socks on. Smooth floor, sorry, smooth wall. Come down, touch the floor. If that feels okay, I can move closer to the wall. You just don't want to move too close and get stuck. And again, you could go up from there. Up, you basically need a press, but it's a good way of working that full range of motion with a restricted range, because the wall's restricting me. Now that one will be a struggle if you don't have good range in your straddle. Basically you'll have to work very far away from the wall, and it means that you'll drop a lot. So if I'm here, don't have much range, it basically means I'm going to drop big time there. That's where the back to wall and then just working mobility in the floor version might be better for you. Some other ways we can go through the path of the handstand is I could do a toes to bar type movement, so a hanging version. So I'm hanging in that position, so there's the handstand, pass through the press, and back down again. Now obviously with these movements I'm showing the straddle version. You could do the same in the tuck or the pike. If you have stool bars, you could do something like this. The trickiest bit with the stool bar version is getting into the position and just finding the right height. So I'm going to come into like a forward fold position, grab hold of the bar, up onto tiptoes, go through the path, there's the handstand position, and back down again. The only thing with these ones is it takes the shoulder out of it, but it's really going through that hip movement similar to the floor version, but just being the other way up. Another variation used quite often in gymnastics is this variation where I've got two boxes and I'm going to put the head through the hole, hold on to the box, and then you can press up from there. We could then jump through the range, so exactly the same going through the path, but this time freestanding, or you could do this back to wall. So I'm going to start with a bit of a jump, so bend the knees, but as I jump I'm going to try and pass through the pathway of the press as much as I can. I could obviously slow that down to an eccentric freestanding if I have it, and just use a little bit of momentum jump to come up. If my balance is a bit off, but I want to use that variation, I could do that up against the wall, same thing. You could do these on a forearm stand or a headstand. Now obviously there's pros and cons to each variation, and if you really want to get that freestanding press to handstand, you want to go with the one that is closest to the real thing for you that you can do with control. And just be careful you don't become an expert at the drill and it doesn't take you closer to the skill. So I'd definitely be working the pathway, the bottom of the press like I've covered before, the partial range reps, and then maybe two of the variations that I've just shown. I recently done a Q&A video on the press to handstand. If you haven't seen that one, definitely check that out because it answers a lot of questions around how to train for the press and covers different body types as well. I am going to do a Q&A for the handstand push-up very soon, so I've got to put a community post up, so make sure you check that out, add any questions to that. Comment with links if you want me to critique your handstand push-up videos, or send me a DM and I'll do that, include that in the YouTube video. Thumbs up and subscribe would be appreciated, and I'll speak to you next time. Thanks guys.